Baby born with wings, woman gives birth to an angel. How is this possible? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the hospital room, mingling with the soft hum of medical monitors and the muffled chatter of nurses in the hallway. As the young woman, Clara, clung to the edges of consciousness, her breaths came in short, shallow bursts. Her labor had been arduous, longer than anticipated, and the exhaustion was etched across her pale face. Yet, despite the weariness that consumed her body, there was an unmistakable spark of determination in her eyes. Clara's hand gripped the metal railing of the hospital bed with a force she didn't realize she possessed. Her other hand clutched the damp towel that the nurse had handed her, twisting it between her fingers. Beside her, her best friend Elena murmured words of encouragement, her voice soft but unwavering. "You're doing amazing, Clara. Just a little more," Elena whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from Clara's forehead. Her voice was the only anchor Clara had amidst the overwhelming tides of pain and fear. Dr. Matthews, a seasoned obstetrician with a kind demeanor, stood at the foot of the bed, his calm voice guiding Clara through each excruciating contraction. "You're almost there," he reassured her. "On the next push, we'll meet your baby." Clara nodded weakly, summoning every ounce of strength she had left. This wasn't how she had imagined this moment. As a child, she had dreamed of a joyful delivery, surrounded by laughter and anticipation. But life had a way of rewriting the script, and Clara had learned to adapt. She was alone, except for Elena, having chosen to navigate this journey without the father of her child. It was a decision she had made months ago, one rooted in self-preservation and a fierce determination to give her baby a better life. The final contraction came like a tidal wave, crashing over Clara with an intensity that stole her breath. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound that echoed through the room. And then, in an instant, the pressure eased, replaced by a sensation of release. The room fell silent, save for the soft cry of a newborn. Dr. Matthews' expression shifted from concentration to awe as he held the tiny infant in his hands. For a moment, he seemed frozen, his eyes fixed on the baby as though trying to comprehend what he was seeing. The nurses exchanged glances, their professional composure slipping into visible astonishment. Elena, too, leaned forward, her hand flying to her mouth as a gasp escaped her lips. "Clara, oh my God." Clara's heart raced as she tried to lift her head, her vision blurred by tears and exhaustion. "What is it? Is my baby okay?" Dr. Matthews finally regained his composure, his voice steady but tinged with wonder. "Your baby is perfectly healthy, Clara. But there's something unusual." He gently placed the newborn on Clara's chest, and as she gazed down at the tiny, wriggling form, her breath caught in her throat. The baby, her baby, was unlike anything she had ever seen. Small, delicate wings, covered in soft, downy feathers, extended from the infant's shoulder blades. They shimmered faintly under the harsh hospital lights, their ethereal beauty defying explanation. Clara's eyes widened as she reached out to touch the wings, her fingers trembling. They were warm and soft, pulsating with life as though they were a natural extension of the child. She looked up at Dr. Matthews, her voice barely above a whisper. What does this mean?" Dr. Matthews hesitated, his brow furrowed as he chose his words carefully. "I've never seen anything like this before," he admitted. "But your baby appears to be perfectly healthy. The wings, they seem to be functional, not just a physical anomaly." Clara's mind raced as she tried to process what she was hearing. Functional wings? It sounded impossible, like something out of a fairy tale. And yet, the proof was right there, nestled against her chest. The baby stirred, its tiny fingers grasping at Clara's gown, and she felt an overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness. Elena leaned closer, her voice filled with a mix of awe and curiosity. "Clara, this is incredible. Your baby is an angel." The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. An angel? Clara's thoughts spiraled as she considered the possibilities. Was this some kind of miracle? A sign? Or was there a scientific explanation that eluded them all? The baby let out a soft coo, its eyes fluttering open to reveal irises that seemed to shimmer with a light of their own. Clara's breath hitched as she gazed into those eyes, feeling as though she were looking into something far greater than herself. Word spread quickly through the hospital. Nurses whispered to each other in the hallways, their curiosity barely contained. Doctors from other departments found excuses to visit the maternity ward, hoping to catch a glimpse of the baby. Clara's room became a focal point of fascination, and despite the staff's attempts to maintain privacy, the news began to leak beyond the hospital walls. By the time morning arrived, reporters had gathered outside, their cameras trained on the entrance. The hospital administration scrambled to manage the situation, issuing statements and implementing security measures to protect Clara and her baby. Inside the room, Clara was oblivious to the chaos brewing outside. Her world had narrowed to the tiny life in her arms. She marveled at the baby's wings, gently running her fingers over the feathers. Each touch sent a ripple of emotion through her, a mix of wonder, fear, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Elena sat by her side, her expression soft as she watched Clara bond with her child. "What are you going to name them?" she asked quietly. Clara hesitated, her gaze fixed on the baby's serene face. She had always imagined naming her child something simple, something that reflected the life she wanted to give them. But now, nothing seemed to fit. This baby was extraordinary, and their name needed to reflect that. "Gabriel," she said finally, her voice firm. "I'll call him Gabriel." Elena smiled. "It's perfect. He's already living up to his name." Clara's lips curved into a faint smile, but her mind was already racing ahead. What would Gabriel's life be like? How would the world react to him? The thought of exposing him to a society that often feared what it didn't understand filled her with dread. She vowed then and there to protect him at all costs. As the hours turned into days, Clara began to realize the magnitude of Gabriel's existence. The world outside her hospital room had erupted into a frenzy, with media outlets speculating wildly about the baby born with wings. Headlines ranged from "Miracle Baby," "Angel born in small town hospital," to "Scientific marvel" or "Divine intervention." Theories abounded, some claiming Gabriel was a genetic mutation, others insisting he was proof of celestial beings. The hospital administration struggled to manage the growing media circus. Reporters camped outside, their lenses trained on every window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the baby who had captured the world's imagination. Clara's room became a fortress, with security guards stationed at the door. She barely had a moment to process her new reality before she was bombarded with requests for interviews and offers of financial assistance. Dr. Matthews, ever the voice of reason, shielded Clara as best he could. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," he assured her. "Your only job right now is to rest and bond with your baby." Clara nodded, grateful for his support. But the pressure weighed heavily on her. She knew she couldn't hide Gabriel forever. The world was watching, and sooner or later, she would have to face it. Elena, ever the practical one, took it upon herself to manage the influx of attention. She fielded phone calls, turned away reporters, and even confronted a particularly persistent journalist who had tried to sneak into the hospital disguised as a maintenance worker. "You're not getting anywhere near them," she said firmly, her hands on her hips. "Now get out before I call security." The journalist scowled but retreated, muttering under his breath. Elena watched him go, her resolve hardening. She would do whatever it took to protect Clara and Gabriel. Inside the room, Clara found solace in the quiet moments she shared with Gabriel. She marveled at his tiny hands, his delicate features, and, of course, his wings. The feathers were soft and warm, shimmering faintly in the sunlight that filtered through the window. They seemed to pulse with life, moving slightly as Gabriel shifted in her arms. Clara couldn't help but wonder about the implications of his wings. Would he be able to fly? Were they a gift or a burden? The questions swirled in her mind, unanswered and unanswerable. One afternoon, as she sat by the window with Gabriel cradled against her chest, she heard a knock at the door. Dr. Matthews entered, his expression thoughtful. "I've been doing some research," he said, pulling up a chair beside her. "There's no precedent for anything like this. But I've contacted a colleague who specializes in genetic anomalies." She's very interested in Gabriel's case. Clara tensed, her protective instincts flaring. You're not suggesting experiments, are you? Dr. Matthews shook his head quickly. No, nothing like that. Just observations and non-invasive tests. I thought it might help us understand more about his wings and what they might mean for his health. Clara hesitated, her gaze dropping to Gabriel. The thought of subjecting him to scrutiny, even for his well-being, made her uneasy. But she also knew that ignorance could be dangerous. If there was a way to ensure Gabriel's health and safety, she owed it to him to explore it. Okay, she said finally. But only if it's absolutely necessary. And only if I'm there. Dr. Matthews nodded, respecting her decision. Of course, we'll take it one step at a time. As the days passed, Clara began to adjust to her new role as Gabriel's mother. She learned to navigate the intricacies of caring for a newborn, from late-night feedings to the delicate process of cleaning his wings. Each day brought new challenges, but also new joys. Elena was a constant presence, offering support and encouragement. She marveled at Gabriel's wings, often joking that he was the most special baby in the world. But beneath her light-hearted demeanor, Clara could see the awe and reverence in her friend's eyes. One evening, as they sat together in the dimly lit hospital room, Elena voiced a thought that had been weighing on both their minds. What do you think it all means? She asked quietly. Why was Gabriel born like this? Clara shook her head, her gaze fixed on her sleeping son. I don't know, she admitted, but I feel like there's a reason. Like he's meant for something greater. Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. Maybe he is. Or maybe he's just a reminder of how extraordinary life can be. Clara smiled faintly, comforted by her friend's words. Whatever the reason for Gabriel's wings, she knew one thing for certain. He was a miracle. And she would do everything in her power to protect him. It wasn't long before Gabriel's story caught the attention of people far beyond their small town. Scientists, religious leaders, and even celebrities weighed in, each offering their own interpretation of his existence. Some saw him as a sign of divine intervention, a message from a higher power. Others viewed him as a scientific marvel, a rare mutation that defied explanation. For Clara, the speculation was both overwhelming and surreal. She felt as though she had been thrust into a spotlight she never asked for, her life dissected and debated by strangers. But amidst the chaos, she found strength in Gabriel. His presence grounded her, reminding her of what truly mattered. One night, as she rocked him to sleep, she whispered a promise into the quiet darkness. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. I'll protect you with everything I have. Gabriel stirred in his sleep, his wings fluttering slightly as though in response. Clara's heart swelled with love, her resolve strengthening. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. The weeks following Gabriel's birth became a whirlwind of activity and emotional turbulence. Clara, still recovering physically and emotionally, found herself juggling the responsibilities of being a new mother with the added burden of living under constant public scrutiny. Every decision she made, from the way she held Gabriel to whether or not she would allow the press to photograph him, was dissected and analyzed by strangers. The hospital staff did their best to shield her from the media frenzy, but even their efforts couldn't stop the letters and gifts from piling up. Some were messages of support and awe, congratulating Clara on the miracle of Gabriel's birth. Others were filled with questions, pleas, and even desperate requests from those who believed Gabriel might hold the key to healing or salvation. Clara tried her best to ignore the outside world, focusing instead on Gabriel. She learned to anticipate his needs, deciphering his cries and coos with the growing intuition of a mother. But the questions lingered in the back of her mind. What did Gabriel's wings mean? What kind of life would he have? And most importantly, how could she protect him from a world that might not understand him? One morning, Clara was startled awake by a knock on the hospital room door. It was Dr. Matthews, accompanied by a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile. She introduced herself as Dr. Elaine Carter, a geneticist and expert in rare biological anomalies. Clara, Dr. Matthews began gently, Dr. Carter is here to help us understand more about Gabriel. I promise. This is purely observational. Clara hesitated, her protective instincts flaring once again. But one look at Gabriel, peacefully sleeping in the bassinet with his tiny wings curled against his back, reminded her of why she had agreed to this. She needed answers, for his sake. She said, her voice steady. But I stay with him the whole time. Dr. Carter nodded, her tone respectful. Of course, Gabriel's well-being is our top priority. The session was conducted with the utmost care. Dr. Carter examined Gabriel's wings, marveling at their structure. They're fully integrated into his skeletal system, she explained. The muscle attachments and bone density suggest they're functional. If he ever tries to fly, he might actually be able to. Clara's breath caught at the thought. The idea of her son soaring through the air was both thrilling and terrifying. But Dr. Carter's next words tempered her awe with caution. However, the wings will likely require special care. They're delicate and could be prone to injury. And as Gabriel grows, we'll need to monitor how his body adapts to their presence. Clara nodded, absorbing the information. Will they hurt him? Or cause problems? Dr. Carter shook her head. There's no indication of that. In fact, he seems perfectly healthy. But his uniqueness will bring challenges, socially, emotionally. People might not always react with kindness. Clara's jaw tightened. She had already experienced the cruelty of strangers in her own life. The thought of Gabriel facing prejudice or fear because of his wings filled her with a fierce determination. I'll make sure he's safe, she said firmly. No matter what. As Gabriel grew stronger, Clara was finally discharged from the hospital. She returned home to a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, where she hoped to find some semblance of normalcy. But the world outside hadn't forgotten about her or her son. Paparazzi staked out her building, and neighbors whispered as she passed. Clara learned to keep the curtains drawn and the door locked, creating a cocoon of safety for Gabriel. Elena became her lifeline, running errands and fending off the curious onlookers who gathered near the building. You're like a celebrity now, Elena joked one day, dropping off a bag of groceries. But not the fun kind. Clara managed a weak smile, her exhaustion evident. I didn't ask for this. I know, Elena said softly. But you're handling it better than most people would. And Gabriel, he's worth it? Clara glanced at her son, who was lying on a blanket on the floor, kicking his legs and flapping his tiny wings. Her heart swelled with love and pride. He is, she agreed. He's everything. Despite the challenges, Clara found moments of joy and wonder in her new life. Watching Gabriel's wings flutter as he slept, hearing his delighted giggles when Elena made silly faces, and feeling the warmth of his tiny body snuggled against hers reminded her of what truly mattered. But the outside world refused to be ignored. One afternoon, Clara received a knock at her door. She peeked through the peephole and saw a man in a suit holding a briefcase. Her stomach churned with anxiety, but she opened the door a crack. Ms. Bennett, the man asked politely. Yes? My name is David Miller. I represent an organization that would like to support you and your son. Clara frowned, wary. What kind of organization? David hesitated, choosing his words carefully. We specialize in providing resources and opportunities for individuals with extraordinary abilities. Gabriel's story has inspired many people, and we believe he has the potential to make a significant impact. Clara's grip on the door tightened. He's a baby, she said sharply. He doesn't need to make an impact. He just needs to be safe and loved. Of course, David said quickly. But we'd like to help ensure he has every opportunity to thrive. That includes financial support, medical care, and education. Clara hesitated. The offer was tempting, especially given her limited resources. But she couldn't shake the feeling that accepting help from strangers might come with strings attached. I'll think about it, she said finally. David handed her a business card. Take your time. We're here if you need us. As the weeks turned into months, Clara began to venture out with Gabriel. She chose quiet parks and secluded walking trails, hoping to avoid the prying eyes of strangers. But even in the most remote places, people seemed drawn to Gabriel. They marveled at his wings, some whispering prayers and others snapping photos before Clara could stop them. One day, as Clara sat on a park bench with Gabriel in her arms, a woman approached cautiously. She was older, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Is this the baby?" the woman asked softly, as though afraid to startle Clara. Clara nodded, her guard up. "This is Gabriel." The woman knelt beside the bench, her expression filled with awe. "He's beautiful. A true miracle." Clara's defenses began to lower as she saw the sincerity in the woman's eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. The woman reached out, but stopped short of touching Gabriel. "I don't mean to intrude, but he's a blessing. Don't ever forget that." Tears pricked Clara's eyes as she nodded. "I won't." The encounter left Clara feeling a mix of emotions, gratitude for the kindness of strangers, but also a deep yearning for privacy. She longed to give Gabriel a normal life, free from the weight of other people's expectations. But she knew that might never be possible. One night, as Clara rocked Gabriel to sleep, she whispered a promise into the darkness. "No matter what happens, I'll always protect you. You're my miracle, Gabriel. And I'll make sure the world sees how special you are, not for your wings, but for who you are." Gabriel stirred in his sleep, his wings fluttering softly. Clara smiled, her heart full. For all the challenges they faced, she knew one thing for certain. She and Gabriel were a team. Together, they would navigate whatever the future held. As the months rolled on, Gabriel's wings grew stronger and more pronounced. They were no longer the tiny, fragile appendages they had been at birth, but were beginning to take on a majestic form, each feather shimmering with a delicate iridescence. Clara marveled at how effortlessly he seemed to carry them, as though they were as natural as his arms and legs. But with each passing day, the weight of the world's interest in her son grew heavier. The media frenzy that had started at the hospital showed no signs of slowing. News outlets speculated endlessly about Gabriel's origins, his potential abilities, and the meaning of his existence. Clara did her best to shield him from the chaos, but it was a constant battle. Every trip to the park or the grocery store was an exercise in caution, with Clara scanning her surroundings for cameras or curious onlookers. Elena remained a steadfast source of support, always ready to step in when Clara felt overwhelmed. One afternoon, as Clara sat on her couch feeding Gabriel, Elena arrived with a stack of mail. Most of it was the usual mix of fan letters, media requests, and unsolicited advice, but one envelope caught Clara's eye. It was plain and unmarked, with no return address. "What do you think it is?" Elena asked, watching Clara turn the envelope over in her hands. "I don't know," Clara admitted, her curiosity piqued. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was handwritten, its tone both reverent and cryptic. "Gabriel is not just your son. He is a gift to the world. Protect him, but do not hide him. His destiny is greater than you can imagine." Clara's stomach twisted as she read the words. She handed the note to Elena, who frowned as she scanned it. "Do you think it's a threat?" Elena asked, her voice low. Clara shook her head. "I don't know. But it's unsettling." Elena nodded, her expression serious. "You should show this to Dr. Matthews. He might have some advice." Clara agreed, though the note lingered in her mind long after Elena left. The idea that Gabriel might have a destiny beyond her understanding was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. She had always believed he was special, but what if he was more than that? What if he truly was meant for something greater? Dr. Matthews took the note seriously, though he couldn't offer any concrete answers. "It's possible someone is just trying to get your attention," he said. "But I think you're right to be cautious. Gabriel's uniqueness makes him a target for curiosity, admiration, and possibly more sinister intentions." Clara's grip on Gabriel tightened. The thought of anyone trying to exploit or harm her son was unbearable. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Keep doing what you're doing," Dr. Matthews advised. "Protect him, but don't isolate yourselves completely. Gabriel needs to experience the world, just like any other child. And if anything feels off, trust your instincts." Clara nodded, grateful for his guidance. But even as she tried to focus on the practicalities of raising Gabriel, the note's words echoed in her mind. "His destiny is greater than you can imagine." As Gabriel grew older, his personality began to shine. He was a joyful, curious child with an infectious laugh and an innate sense of wonder. Clara loved watching him explore the world, his wings often flapping excitedly as he discovered new sights and sounds. But she couldn't ignore the way people reacted to him. Some were awestruck, others fearful, and a few even hostile. One day, as Clara and Gabriel strolled through a quiet park, a man approached them. He was middle-aged, with a weathered face and a hard edge to his voice. "Is that the winged baby everyone's talking about?" he asked, his tone more accusatory than curious. Clara hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. "This is my son, Gabriel," she said carefully. The man scoffed. "That's not natural. You should keep him hidden, for his own sake." Clara bristled at the man's words. "Gabriel is just as natural as you or me," she said firmly. "And he has every right to be here." The man shook his head, muttering something under his breath before walking away. Clara watched him go, her heart pounding. Encounters like this were rare, but they served as a stark reminder of the challenges Gabriel would face as he grew older. When she recounted the incident to Elena later that evening, her friend's reaction was swift and fierce. "You should have told him to mind his own business," Elena said, her eyes flashing. "Gabriel doesn't need anyone's approval to exist." Clara smiled faintly, grateful for Elena's unwavering support. "I know, but it's hard not to let it get to me." Elena placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're doing an amazing job, Clara. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Despite the challenges, Clara began to notice something remarkable. Gabriel had a way of bringing people together, even in the most unlikely circumstances. His innocence and charm seemed to disarm even the most skeptical onlookers. One day, while shopping at a local market, Clara watched as Gabriel reached out to a little girl in a stroller beside him. The girl giggled, her initial shyness melting away as she took Gabriel's hand. The girl's mother, who had been watching with a wary expression, softened as she saw the interaction. "He's beautiful," she said quietly, her eyes darting to Gabriel's wings. "I've never seen anything like this." Clara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you. He's my miracle." The woman nodded, her gaze lingering on Gabriel. "I think he's a miracle for all of us." Moments like these reminded Clara of the good in people. For every harsh word or judgmental glance, there were moments of kindness and connection that reaffirmed her belief in humanity. As Gabriel approached his first birthday, Clara decided it was time to share him with the world on her own terms. She arranged for a small, carefully controlled interview with a trusted journalist, hoping to tell their story in a way that honored Gabriel's uniqueness without sensationalizing it. The interview took place in Clara's living room, with Gabriel perched on her lap. The journalist, a kind woman named Sophie, asked thoughtful questions, focusing on Clara's journey and the love she had for her son. "What do you hope for Gabriel's future?" Sophie asked toward the end of the interview. Clara paused, her eyes softening as she looked at her son. "I hope he grows up knowing how loved he is. I hope he's surrounded by kindness and understanding. And I hope he never feels like he has to prove his worth to anyone." The interview aired a week later, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Messages of support poured in from around the world, with people sharing their own stories of love and acceptance. Clara was deeply moved by the outpouring of compassion, and for the first time since Gabriel's birth, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. But amidst the positivity, there were still challenges to navigate. Clara knew that Gabriel's journey was just beginning, and the road ahead would be filled with both triumphs and trials. But she also knew that they would face it together, one step at a time. As she tucked Gabriel into his crib that night, she whispered a promise into the stillness. "Whatever the future holds, we'll face it together. You're my miracle, Gabriel. And I'll always be here for you." Gabriel stirred in his sleep, his wings fluttering softly as though in response. Clara smiled, her heart full. For all the uncertainty and challenges they faced, she knew one thing for certain. She and Gabriel were a team. Together, they would navigate whatever the future held, guided by love and an unshakable bond. As Gabriel approached his first steps, Clara's life had become a delicate balance of wonder and vigilance. Every milestone he reached was accompanied by a mix of joy and anxiety. His wings, now strong enough to flap with purpose, had become an integral part of his daily movements. Sometimes, as he crawled across the floor, his wings would lift slightly, giving him the appearance of a cherub caught mid-flight. Clara couldn't help but smile, even as the thought of the challenges he'd face in the future weighed heavily on her mind. One sunny afternoon, Clara decided to take Gabriel to a nearby park. It was a quiet spot she'd discovered a few weeks earlier, tucked away from the bustling streets and prying eyes. She packed a small picnic, determined to enjoy a rare moment of peace with her son. As they settled on a blanket under the shade of a large oak tree, Gabriel gurgled happily, his tiny hands reaching for the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Clara watched him with a mixture of awe and trepidation. He was her world, and she would do anything to protect him. But peace was fleeting. A soft rustle of footsteps interrupted her thoughts, and Clara looked up to see a group of children approaching, their curious eyes fixed on Gabriel. Behind them, a young woman, presumably their caretaker, followed hesitantly. "Hi," the woman said, her tone tentative. "I'm sorry to bother you, but is that the baby everyone's been talking about?" Clara hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. But the children's wide-eyed wonder and the woman's respectful demeanor eased her tension. "This is Gabriel," she said cautiously. The children gathered around, their faces alight with curiosity. One of the boys, no older than 5, pointed at Gabriel's wings. "Are those real?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Clara smiled softly. "They are. He was born with them." "Cool," another child exclaimed, crouching to get a closer look. Gabriel, ever the social butterfly, flapped his wings in delight, eliciting giggles from the group. The young woman knelt beside Clara, her expression a mix of amazement and admiration. "He's beautiful," she said sincerely. "I can't imagine what it must be like for you." Clara nodded, her gaze fixed on Gabriel. "It's a lot," she admitted. "But he's worth it." The interaction left Clara with a bittersweet feeling. On one hand, it was heartening to see Gabriel accepted and celebrated by strangers. On the other, it reminded her of how unusual his life would always be. She couldn't help but wonder how he would navigate a world that often feared what it didn't understand. That evening, as Clara prepared Gabriel's dinner, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from David Miller, the representative from the organization that had reached out months earlier. Clara had initially dismissed his offer, wary of involving strangers in her son's life. But now, curiosity got the better of her. She opened the email and read, "Dear Ms. Bennett, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to follow up on our previous conversation and let you know that our offer still stands. We believe Gabriel has the potential to inspire and unite people in ways that few can. If you're open to it, we'd love to discuss how we can support you both on this journey. Best regards, David Miller." Clara sighed, her thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty. She didn't want Gabriel to become a spectacle or a symbol. But at the same time, she couldn't deny that their lives were already far from ordinary. Perhaps it was worth hearing David out. A week later, Clara found herself sitting across from David in a cozy coffee shop. She had chosen the location carefully, ensuring it was far enough from her home to avoid any potential disruptions. Gabriel sat in a stroller beside her, happily chewing on a teething ring. "Thank you for meeting with me," David said, his demeanor professional yet warm. "I understand this is a lot to take in." Clara nodded, her expression guarded. "I'm here to listen. That's all." David smiled. "Of course. First and foremost, I want to assure you that our organization's priority is Gabriel's well-being. We're not here to exploit him or invade your privacy. Our goal is to provide resources and opportunities that will help him thrive." "What kind of resources?" Clara asked, her tone skeptical. "Specialized medical care, for starters," David explained. "As he grows, his wings will require attention from experts who understand their unique anatomy. We can connect you with specialists who have experience in rare biological conditions. Additionally, we offer financial support, education programs, and a network of families who've navigated similar challenges." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Similar challenges? Are you saying there are other children like Gabriel?" David hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Not exactly. Gabriel is unique in many ways. But we've worked with families whose children have extraordinary abilities or physical differences. They've faced similar societal pressures and can offer valuable insight. Clara considered his words, her mind racing. The offer was tempting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. "And what do you want in return?" she asked pointedly. David met her gaze, his expression earnest. "Nothing you're not comfortable with. If you choose to work with us, we'd like to document Gabriel's journey, not for profit, but to inspire and educate others. You would have full control over how much or how little is shared." Clara leaned back in her chair, her thoughts a tangled web of hope and hesitation. "I'll think about it," she said finally. David nodded, his smile unwavering. "Take all the time you need. We're here if you decide to move forward." The decision weighed heavily on Clara in the days that followed. She sought advice from Elena, who was as pragmatic as ever. "It's a big risk," Elena said, sipping her tea. "But it could also be a big opportunity. If they're genuine, they might be able to give Gabriel things you can't." Clara frowned, her gaze distant. "I just don't want him to feel like he has to be anything more than my son. I don't want him to carry the weight of other people's expectations." Elena reached across the table, squeezing Clara's hand. "You'll make the right choice. You always do." In the end, it was Gabriel himself who helped Clara decide. One afternoon, as she watched him play with a stuffed animal, she was struck by the thought of how much he had already endured. He deserved every advantage she could give him, even if it meant stepping out of her comfort zone. Clara contacted David the next day, agreeing to a trial partnership with his organization. The first step was a consultation with a team of specialists who examined Gabriel's wings and provided detailed guidance on their care. Clara was relieved to learn that Gabriel was healthy and thriving, with no immediate concerns. The next phase involved connecting with other families in the organization's network. Clara was initially hesitant, but she quickly found solace in their shared experiences. While none of their stories were identical to hers, they all understood the challenges of raising children who didn't fit society's mold. As the months turned into years, Clara found herself navigating a delicate balance between protecting Gabriel's privacy and embracing his uniqueness. With the organization's support, she was able to provide him with the resources he needed to thrive, from specialized medical care to a supportive community. Gabriel, for his part, continued to shine. His wings became a symbol of resilience and beauty, inspiring everyone who met him. And while the world's fascination with him never truly faded, Clara learned to focus on what mattered most, their bond as mother and son. One evening, as Clara tucked Gabriel into bed, she reflected on how far they had come. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had also been filled with moments of joy and connection that she wouldn't trade for anything. "You're my miracle," she whispered, brushing a kiss against his forehead. "And no matter what the future holds, I'll always be by your side." Gabriel stirred in his sleep, his wings curling around him like a protective cocoon. Clara smiled, her heart full. Together, they would face whatever came next, guided by love and the unshakable bond they shared. As Gabriel approached his 5th birthday, Clara's life had transformed into a blend of the extraordinary and the ordinary. To the world, he remained a miracle, a child born with wings who defied explanation. To Clara, he was simply her son, a curious, mischievous boy who filled her days with laughter and the occasional headache. Yet, even in their relatively quiet life, Gabriel's presence continued to ripple outward, touching the lives of those around him. Clara had grown more confident in navigating the complexities of raising a child as unique as Gabriel. She worked closely with specialists to ensure his wings were healthy and developing properly. She learned how to sew custom shirts to accommodate his wings, a skill she never thought she'd need but now excelled at. And most importantly, she nurtured Gabriel's confidence, teaching him to embrace his differences rather than hide from them. But despite her efforts, Clara couldn't shield Gabriel from everything. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through their neighborhood, a group of older boys spotted them from across the street. At first, they simply stared, their eyes widening as they noticed Gabriel's wings. Then the whispers started, followed by laughter that carried through the cool air. "Hey, is that a bird, kid?" one of them called out, his tone mocking. Clara's grip on Gabriel's hand tightened. She glanced down at her son, whose cheerful expression had faltered. "Ignore them," she said softly, guiding him forward. But the boys weren't done. They crossed the street, their taunts growing louder. "Can he fly? Maybe we should throw him off a roof and find out." Clara spun around, her eyes flashing with anger. "That's enough," she said sharply. "Leave us alone." The boys hesitated, their bravado faltering under Clara's glare. But as they backed away, Clara could see the damage had already been done. Gabriel's wings drooped slightly, his usual bounce replaced with a subdued shuffle. When they returned home, Gabriel was unusually quiet. He sat on the living room floor, absent-mindedly running his fingers over the feathers of his wings. Clara knelt beside him, her heart aching. "Gabriel," she said gently, "you know those boys were wrong, don't you? They were mean because they don't understand how special you are." Gabriel looked up at her, his eyes wide and earnest. "But why don't they like my wings, Mama? I like them." Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "Some people are afraid of things that are different," she explained. "But being different is what makes you amazing. Your wings are part of who you are, and you should never let anyone make you feel bad about that." Gabriel considered her words, his small face serious. Then he reached out and wrapped his arms around her, his wings folding around them both. "I love you, Mama," he whispered. Clara held him close, her resolve strengthening. She couldn't change the world's reaction to Gabriel, but she could teach him to face it with courage and self-love. As winter approached, Clara decided to enroll Gabriel in a local preschool. She had wrestled with the decision for months, torn between her desire to protect him and the knowledge that he needed to interact with other children. In the end, she chose a small, inclusive school with a reputation for nurturing diversity and acceptance. On Gabriel's first day, Clara walked him to the classroom, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and anxiety. The teacher, a warm woman named Ms. Harper, greeted them at the door. "Welcome, Gabriel," she said, crouching to his level. "We're so excited to have you here." Gabriel clung to Clara's hand, his wings twitching nervously. "What if they don't like me?" he whispered. Clara knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Just be yourself," she said. "And remember, I'll be back to pick you up before you know it." Gabriel nodded, though his grip on her hand remained firm. Clara gave him one last hug before gently guiding him into the classroom. As she walked away, her heart felt both heavy and hopeful. The first few weeks were an adjustment, but Gabriel soon found his footing. To Clara's relief, most of the children were curious but accepting of his wings. They peppered him with questions. "Do they hurt? Can you fly?" which he answered with a mix of patience and pride. One boy, a shy child named Max, became particularly enamored with Gabriel. "I think your wings are cool," Max told him one day during recess. "I wish I had wings too." Gabriel beamed, his confidence bolstered by the simple statement. From that day on, the two were inseparable, their bond a source of joy for both their families. But not everyone was as welcoming. One afternoon, as Clara arrived to pick Gabriel up, she found him sitting alone on a bench outside the classroom. His wings were tucked tightly against his back, and his usual smile was nowhere to be seen. "What happened, sweetheart?" she asked, kneeling beside him. Gabriel hesitated, his lower lip trembling. "A boy said my wings are weird. He said I'm not normal." Clara's heart ached as she pulled him into a hug. "I'm so sorry, Gabriel," she said softly. "But you know what? Normal is just a word. It doesn't mean anything. What matters is who you are, and you are kind, brave, and special." Gabriel sniffled, leaning into her embrace. "Do you think my wings are weird, Mama?" Clara smiled, cupping his face in her hands. "I think your wings are the most beautiful thing in the world. And anyone who doesn't see that is missing out." Clara's unwavering support, combined with the love of those who accepted him, helped Gabriel navigate the challenges of being different. Over time, he began to embrace his wings not just as a part of him, but as a source of pride and identity. By the time spring rolled around, Gabriel was thriving. He had made friends, found his place in the classroom, and even inspired the school to hold an annual Uniqueness Day, celebrating the qualities that made each child special.